Namaste and greetings. I, Yashika, researcher at IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. We are gathered here for the final day of Ending Gender-Based Violence, Cohort 2, Awareness of Policies and Governance. An online National Spring School program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course. This training program is organized by IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center. The chair of this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, New Delhi. This program has an excellent panel of experts who will be sharing their expertise for the duration of this program. The distinguished expert panel includes Advocate Dr. Flavia Agnes ji, Advocate Dr. Albertina ji, Dr. Wahida Nenar ji, Professor Bijaya Lakshmi Nanda ji, Professor Veena Vaswani ji, Miss Anju Dubey Pandey ji, Dr. Padma Diosthali ji, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, Maya Avasthi ji, Advocate Celine Thomas ji, Professor Soumya Uma ji, Dr. Kirthi ji, Advocate Audrey Damello ji, Miss Nandini Sarkar ji, and Mr. Harish Sadani ji. The panel of conveners comprises of Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, Professor Gumidi Sridevi ji, Dr. Simi Mehta ji, and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. Continuing with our commitment to fostering awareness and actionable insights, I extend a warm welcome to all participants engaging in this crucial discourse on ending gender-based violence. I express gratitude for your keen interest and dedication in investing time, energy, and efforts towards comprehending the intricate landscape of policies and governance surrounding this pervasive issue. Your participation plays a pivotal role in uniting practitioners and enthusiasts alike, creating a collaborative space for impactful policy research and advocacy. Thank you for your invaluable contributions to this transformative course. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions on the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the questions to save time. Now, without any further ado, let us start with our program. It is my honor and privilege to invite the chair of the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to start the program with her opening chair remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Yashika, and welcome, Mr. Harish Sadani, my long-term co-traveler in the social movement, and the respect that I have had for the important work which Man Against Violence and Women has been doing. Thank you, Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Vaishali Singh, Ms. Priyanka Negi, Shri Satyam Tripathi, Ms. Vitita, and today's moderator, Ms. Yashika. Today's we are going to have a valedictory session, and we are going to have a very mind-blowing session about action planning and next steps, gender-based violence and LGBTQIA plus community. But let us have a recap of what all has transpired in the previous 7 days. The first day we began with the overall understanding and the historical context of campaign against gender-based violence in the late 70s and early 80s in the post-emergency period, and the action strategies which were evolved by the women's movement, both the autonomous women's movement and the women's friends of the political parties, mostly left parties. Second session we had on the first day was by Advocate Flavia Agnes, who gave an inaugural address, and she also gave such a comprehensive view of role of policies in addressing gender-based violence. She discussed both policies as well as the legal reforms, series of legal reforms we had from 1977 onwards. And participants introduced themselves. On the second day, we had a very important session, remarkable session by Dr. Albertina Almeida, who tried to show the connection between policy approaches and the legislative reforms that we had, and through the legal activism and courtroom scenario also she described, and she also shared her experiences of being in the women's movement in Goa and organization by Lancho Saad's contribution to that. Dr. Vaida Nayanar acclimatized us with the global scenario of combating gender-based violence and introduced us to various aspects and the clauses of Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And we had a first legal hands-on session by Advocate Shalu Nigam, who examined and critically reflected on the recent judgments in sexual violence and accountability of the criminal justice system. She took right from Kathua to the Bilkis Bano case, all the important judgments she discussed and analyzed. Day 3, we had Professor Vijaya Lakshmi Nanda, who spoke on role of governance in combating gender-based violence and structures and strategies. She took up this whole question of Nirbhaya tragedy and the responses with the colleges and the teachers and students and youth of India had. She also discussed the ups and downs in implementation of PCP and DT Act, some of the schemes of the government, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, she tried to unpack. Professor Veena Vaswani's session was on gender-based violence and what are the medical legal evidences that we need to have. And she explained that on the basis of her first-hand experience as a forensic expert. Second legal hands-on session by Dr. Advocate Shalu Nigam was on concept of consent in the socio-legal discourses, and when it comes to the question of sexual harassment and sexual violence, understanding on consent, how court understands consent, how the survivor sees the lack of consent, which violates her dignity and bodily integrity. And the whole debate we had around several cases where right from Mathura's time, whether it was a consensual sex or a gender-based violence or a sexual violence, that controversy she discussed. Day 4 was marked by Ms. Anju Dubey Pandey's presentation on case studies of effective gender-based violence interventions. And she also shared her experiences of both being in the organizations such as Center for Social Research and also UN Women. Dr. Padma Devastali, she spoke on the psychological dimension of understanding trauma of the survivor of sexual violence and gender-based violence based on her experiences of a one-stop crisis center called Itilasa, and also what are the techniques evolved in terms of healing of the survivor and also the counselors and the support people to prevent burnout. Advocate Shalu Nigam's third legal hands-on session was on safety of women at homes and the question of domestic abuse. She also provided metadata, statistical understanding, the legal provisions, and the operational issues faced in providing support to survivor of violence. Day 5 was marked by the presentation by Ms. Rituparna ji, who spoke on gender-based violence of LGBTQIA plus communities based on the grassroots level mobilizations in Northeast. And it was an extremely engaging session, spoke with passion, gave so many personal vinyas and also the case studies. Advocate Celine Thomas talked about the realities on the ground and experiences and challenges she faces as a lawyer and a legal activist in Bangalore, and what kind of challenges she, a lawyer as well as the survival faces while fighting against gender-based violence. Advocate Shalu Nigam's fourth session on legal hands-on was functioning of criminal justice system, and she started with the handbook on combating gender stereotypes, which was issued by Supreme Court of India in I think August 2023, and which also had a massive ripple effect. And after that, she also talked about the misogyny and the sexist biases in the implementation of all the legal reforms. We may have a very good laws and legislative protection, but at an operational level, so many hurdles come up because of the biases and gender stereotypes. Day 6 was very important in terms of discussion on contribution of women's rights movement in addressing gender-based violence for Professor Soumya Uma. She gave a very, very detailed account of how gender-based violence was taken up in Indian context, right from the social reform movement, during the freedom movement, in the post-independence period, and also after the new women's movement when it took shape, and the structures and systems that were evolved for implementation of the legal reforms. Dr. Kirti Bolanini, she spoke on the NGOs as a catalyst for change, and she showed so many different ways of doing advocacy, intervention strategies, and implementation of gender policies at a grassroots level, so that they just don't remain the paper tigers, but we are able to make transformative changes. The fifth session of Advocate Shalu Nigam was very important because it dealt with a new form of gender-based violence, which is cyber crimes, and the new how the Ministry of IT or the legal provisions that we have under Indian Penal Code, and how can they be of help, and more awareness is required about that. Yesterday was the 7th day, and we discussed the collaborative approach of ending gender-based violence. Audrey DeMello, who has been in the women's movement right from her school days, she grew up in the culture of the women's protests, and she discussed and what she observed as a child, and when she grew up, and when she became director of Majlis. Whole journey she shared in a very, very heart-touching way, and it was a building partnership, collaborative approaches for coordinated response to gender-based violence. And she gave excellent, powerful examples of how the corruption in family courts, or the delays in cases of family courts, were dealt with by protest, which generally the lawyers don't do, and also the while dealing with the POCSO cases of protection of children from the sexual abuse cases, and also rape survivors cases. Ms. Nandini Sarkar also made a very good presentation on deep dive into tackling sexual harassment through posh policies for a secure work and environment. She has been very actively working on these issues right from the time of a new law in 2013 that we got, Protection of Women from Sexual Harassment Act, and she sits on the various ICC committees and the POSH committees of corporate world, of private and public sector enterprises, and she shared that how even women, so many times they don't support the survivor. They ally with the patriarchs and the tormentors, and this is the painful reality she described. The last session on legal hands-on was a 6th session where Advocate Shalu Nigam talked about human rights and the disenfranchised. This was a very, very important session because it expanded the definition of gender-based violence and in terms of systems and structures that create deprivation and lack of dignity, and by starving them, by creating such a major crisis for the livelihood of the people. And she also said that how Right to Food campaign resulted in National Food Security Act 2003. So we had very rich discussion in those more than 20 sessions so far, and now over to IMPRI.
Thank you, ma'am, for your guidance as we embark on the 8th day. On that note, we are now progressing towards the valedictory address and community-led initiatives, empowering local solutions for gender equality. I am delighted to invite Mr. Harish Sadani ji, co-founder and executive director of Men Against Violence and Abuse, to take the floor. If you could kindly take it from here, sir.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah.
So firstly, thank you, IMPRI India, for organizing this very vital course, and with such a wide range of personalities, people working in the field of gender and development for several years. So it's really interesting, and I'm so glad that you have an eclectic mix of participants from the diverse, from university and college students to professionals in the field, not just from India, but I guess there are from online elsewhere also people who have joined. So it's a really heartening to note. And this is the second cohort, right? So I think this is a very interesting. For people convenience wise, since the COVID times, use of online, I think this has been very constructively thought of, and I'm sure the different perspectives and insights which all of you might have got, will really
There
help.
is a response from the participant. Please speak loudly. They can't hear.
Oh, okay.
Or come closer to the mic. Yeah.
Yeah. Now is it better? Actually,
Yes, it is
put it
better.
on high
Yes.
volume.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. So, I have some slides to share. I'll just can you tell whether this is visible as a single slide, right? Uh, so I'm going to talk on empowering youth in the community because I've been working passionately for over the last 3 decades, focusing on youth and specifically young men and adolescent boys, innovative methods for gender equality. So I'm sure in the past several sessions of the module of the cohort, you must have covered on understanding on gender, and which we say the ideas, roles and norms, the three important words when we say about being a man or a woman. So gender is a social construct, and when we say social construct, similarly masculinity, like femininity, is also a social construct, and it's not a unitary construct. It is shaped by various subsystems of society like family, religion, education, governance, and the media. I call these as the five pillars, which are the subsystems of society. And if these are the subsystems, then the wider system, which is the structural framework, that is actually patriarchy, the wider subsystem on the basis of which these subsystems work, right? uh, I'll go to the next slide. uh, So I'm sure gender-based violence, which has been covered as an integral part of this course, what are the various forms of gender-based violence? So, this pyramid, which is shown in the slide, you can see that often, largely in society, whenever the topic about gender-based violence is talked, people are talking about rape, sexual assault, physical violence, but the other forms of violence, which are in 3, 4, and 5 layers of the pyramid, you find that those are least talked about. And not only that, you find that the the way things have been normalized, that they are not seen as part of gender based violence even by women themselves. At the same time, at the wider level, the way with which men with impunity have been behaving and responding, you find that these sexist jokes, which are rampant, swear words in the name of mother and sister, objectification, or rigid gender stereotypes. So these are, we must understand, like topics that has to be brought out in the conversation as a larger public discourse. Um, so let's go to the next. So if we say gender based violence has is a wider societal issue, it is a public health issue and a human rights issue in our country. So for that it calls for interventions by different stakeholders. Multiple stakeholders will have to play a role, and for that, one clarity we all should be having is that in a fight for a gender just, gender equal society, who is our enemy? Is it men? So the answer is not men, but the dominating mindset, which is at the roots. And the word feminism, which you have all understood over the past sessions, is not something which is anti men, not something, if it advocates for a egalitarian, pluralistic society, uh, and the philosophy, the approach of feminism is not to shun men or exclude men, but rather call them as allies, as important partners in the fight for a gender just society, for a non violent society, the dream of which is for all in the society, not just for women. We want a gender just society, non-violent society for not just women but for men, for trans people, for people with queer identities. They all have a right to live a life of dignity and safety, right? So we must be crystal clear. So if our, just as for a casteless society, the enemy is not Brahmins as a group. The enemy is Brahmanism or Brahminical tendencies, you know. So if we are crystal clear that if our enemy is not Brahmins, and you have seen in the past examples, when Jyotiba Phule, who started the first school for girls in Maharashtra, you you must have noticed that he started the school in a place called Bhidewada, which some of you know who are Marathi speaking, that Bhide by a surname refers to somebody belong to the so-called higher caste, even though you may not believe in it, right? So the message which Jyotiba was trying to tell was that I am starting a school for the disadvantaged girls, but I'm also conveying by starting the school in Bhidewada that my enemy is not Brahmins, but my enemy is Brahmanism, that tendency that says that my caste is superior and all are below under me, right? So the same thing in a gender, uh, in a fight for a gender equal society, the enemy is not men, but the male mindset, the dominating mindset. If that is so, then it becomes easier for all of us to understand why to work with men and boys. So in this slide you can see that there are four distinct aspects as to why we need to work with men. The first one is that men's attitudes are part of the problem. So if their attitudes are part of the problem, so they should be also part of the solution, right? So if one has to address the root cause of gender based violence, just working with women and girls is not enough, because you will empower them so that they can assert themselves, but at the same time, where the attitudes need to be changed, where men feel threatened and don't know how to respond, you will have to work and engage them as a part of the solution, right? So that is the first point. The second point, you must have all seen in the past sessions that all the subsystems of society, you find men are the controllers, whether it's family, religion, education, governance, or media. So if they are the controllers, if power is concentrated among men, if you need to have a balance of power with men and other gendered people, then You need to work with men so that they do not concentrate power. There is no monopolization, there is no concentration of power in men, but rather sharing of power with all gendered people. So even for that, second point is for that also we need to work with men. Third, while many men are seen as perpetrators, this word we use for our understanding of perpetrators of violence, uh, we also should understand that there are men who are non-violent, who are non-aggressive, and who see women as equals. So we have to ask a question: is there a role for such men in the visioned society that we are dreaming of, or men have to be kept aloof? They have no role to play. So if you find in surrounding in your workplace and elsewhere, there are some good number of men who say that I am not violent with the woman in my lives, and so such men, you would need to harness the potential of those men as allies in the fight, right? So that is the third factor for which you need to engage working with men and boys. Fourth is most important, that while the patriarchal system, the male dominated system is impacting women as a group, it has serious repercussions on women's health, physical, psychological, and other well-being related to women, but also it impacts men. This kind of dominated system, the patriarchy, puts rigid gender roles, not just on women, but even imposes on men. And so men also feel suffocated in those molds of patriarchy, and they also need liberation from the shackles of patriarchy, right? You find that right from a younger age, boys, as they are growing up, they are told that they have to be achievers, they have to be winners. uh, they shouldn't take no for an answer, in whatever they are pursuing, right? They are told from a younger age that as they grow up, they have to not just earn, but earn a lot of money, take care of not just the woman, but other elderly, other members of the household. So they have to have shouldering the responsibility to include that they are the main carriers of the legacy. So as a result, they have taken on them unrealistic expectations on them, and this takes a toll on their health. If they are not able to be seen as achievers, if they see themselves as failed men in their eyes and in the eyes of others, then it has repercussions on men's health also. You find examples of suicides, men who are frustrated and who cannot take no from women. You find that the repercussions of that you are seeing in different incidents, contemporary happenings. So in a way, we are all saying that a liberation sense is to be seen not only among women but also among men. So let's go to the next slide. So you find these expectations of men that emotions they have to suppress. You find men not able to just not cry, as is shown in the slide, but even other emotions they are told to curtail. From a younger age, you find that men's EQ is being thwarted. Emotional quotient, which is as important as intelligent IQ, intelligent quotient. That is given importance by many, but the EQ remains largely underdeveloped. The moment you find young men expressing and they are told that, why are you talking like a girl? So you find these different words which are written: man up, don't be a pussy. So you find somewhere, the masculinity, the ideas about masculinity, which is the prevailing ideas of dominant masculinity, is something we have to question. And if gender is a social construct, masculinity is also social construct, right? So therefore, we have to interrogate the existing model of masculinity, and we need to redefine masculinity. We need to reconstruct masculinity, you know, uh, and that can be done through different methodologies and tools that you will employ while working with men and boys. So, you know, the organization which I belong to, MAVA, as you can see in the slide, Men Against Violence and Abuse. So this is a 31-year-old organization, the first in India as a pioneer to have been started working with men and boys. You know, in 1991, we were born. So MAVA gives space for boys and men to learn, unlearn, and self reflect. So you can see that even the insignia, the logo of Mawat is a telling logo. You can see the answer to me, since your cohort course title is Ending Violence. So you can see the answer to we is shown by an insignia which is of woman's insignia. So here, the answer to violence has to be in a non-violent way, and women are showing the path to even men who are in this struggle, in this fight, joined as allies. So, you know, and the pathway is through peaceful ways, through non-violent ways, you know, through dialogue. So you can see the peace bird sign which is there in the logo is also talking about the vision which our organization, as a leading organization in India, we are based in Mumbai. So, you know, some of you would be very interested to know that how the organization came into being. So this was in 1991 when a small ad and an appeal, you can see the appeal which is given in the center. This was an appeal given by a senior journalist, a distinguished journalist called C.Y. Gopinath, who was writing a column in the Daily Indian Express. And he thought that while an article on domestic violence was written by his colleague Claire Talwalkar, he thought that why not give an appeal as a potential solution, possible solution, calling for men who believe that wives are not for battering, and if there are men who can come together and do something. That was the appeal which was published in English and in other languages, sister publications of Indian Express. And I'm heartened to say that 205 men, including me, had responded to that ad appeal. And then I gathered some 30-35 men who were called by C.Y. Gopinath for a face to face meeting. And that's how this organization, MAVA, was born. And in the past 31 years, you know, we have covered a wide range of activities that focus at three level. You know, if I can say, strategically, we thought that our work should be focusing on the preventive level, while it is equally important to work at a curative level. And I'm sure you would know the distinction. Curative would mean that after an incident of violence has happened, then how do you work with men concerned and enable them to help stop that violence, right? So, and sadly speaking, when the curative level work, it calls for counseling, guidance, group counseling, face-to-face counseling, and the kind, for which there is a woeful dearth of efforts in our country. Whenever you talk about counselors, they are largely, they call themselves as family counselors run by several groups, civil society bodies across India. Their focus largely has been counseling women and children, but counseling men has not been given as equal importance and weightage. So that part remains largely neglected. And an organization like MAVA had for a long time, you know, started work on counseling, but because it's a non-funded area for which you need sustained support, for which a dedicated team is needed. You know, our program on counseling has been jinxed, I must say. So as a result, our focus is more on preventive, and in preventive, you find it's a 2-3 level where we use cultural advocacy as a tool, where we use out of the box methods like interactive workshops, street theater, experimental theater, film screenings, folk media, social media. And I'm happy to say that for a long time, last 20 years plus, I have been mentoring a large number of young men in their 20s, and they were university going, college going. You know, it started from Pune with some 35 young men. And I'm happy to say that over the years, some 1,000 young men I have, 1,000 plus young men I have mentored. This work has now, in the last 3 years, spread to outside Maharashtra, you know, where we have been based. So outside Maharashtra, we have been able to develop a cadre of young men as uh, communicators who are working in Gujarat, Assam, and Karnataka. You know, so in collaboration with several local bodies, we have been able to upscale our work and amplify our effort. And so you can see the pictures here which talk that, you know, a publication also we bring out in Marathi, which is a magazine by men, for men, of men. And it has some of the best articles were translated in the form of a book in English. And I'm happy to say that this book, several copies were reprinted, and now there are hardly few copies left. But people are demanding that we should come up with a new volume. So I this magazine and the book is first of its kind because it talks about a first person account by men who are wanting to change the gender transformative ideas. So some of the mentors of mine, you can see they are talking about male entitlement to power and privilege. And for that, you need to promote a critical thinking and a dialogue with men. They will have to undo power, right? And along with, you know, so one of the important points we must realize that we have to question the heteronormativity, you know, which is being reinforced by all our subsystems. So, along with patriarchy, we must remember that heteronormativity is also something with which we have to fight. That is looking at gender beyond the binaries. So either you have been looking gender in the lens of either a cis man or a cis woman, heterosexual man or a heterosexual woman. Beyond these two gender binaries, there are a wide range of other gender identities, which is called as a gender spectrum. So, you know, you find in this picture a well known activist who's a LGBT activist talking to my mentees and you know, youth from colleges and universities. So we encourage that dialogue so that the understanding is widened and we come to know. So here's an example of how theater is used as a tool. Posters which talk about you know, engaging of men to rise on the occasion, you know, where does the strength of men lie? Is it in physical strength, but rather other kind of strength where they see women as equals, right? And you find that 16 days of activism, which is from 25th November till the 10th of December, observed internationally. So our organization takes specific campaigns during this 16 days, the fortnight, and we try to use you know, material which is developed by the youth themselves. So you can see the placards which the youth are holding in the rally that is brought out, taken during those 16 days, especially on 10 December, the concluding day, which is an International Human Rights Day. So I must tell you that this is another very important initiative I have been doing through my team. That is a 2 days traveling film festival, a 2 day festival of films on gender themes, covering the wide spectrum of gender, is what we have been doing in several 2 tier, 3 tier cities of India. So this happy to say that this has become like an annual feature since 2017. We are having the film screenings and discussions over 2 days in several leading colleges, universities, civil society bodies. And I'm happy to say that with with the suggestion given by Kamla Vasin, a well-known legendary gender activist, she told us that we should go beyond India. We should go to South Asian other countries, neighboring countries where there are similar patterns of issues on gender. So I'm happy to say that in the last 3 years, we have gone to Bangladesh, Nepal, Indonesia, and Bhutan. And this year, we are planning to go to Sri Lanka and Singapore, a Southeast Asian country, also where there are similar patterns of issues on gender based discrimination and gender based violence. So, here are some glimpses of, we call gender rights activists, academicians, filmmakers to engage with the audience. And you can see that, anecdote sharing, asking of questions, some often taboo topics are being discussed openly and freely. So this kind of festival gives us the safe space. So what Mava has been doing, providing the safe space to talk about consent and dissent. All this must have been covered in the last few sessions. Understanding what is sexual harassment, standing up for the rights. So, when you say standing up, you need to also call out those men who have been uh, you know, inflicting violence on women. So it is important to take stands and call out those men and engage other men to be bystander, to be an upstander rather than a bystander. And it should start from simple steps like saying no to sexist jokes, misogyny, and casual sexism that you find in day-to-day life. So this slide tries to encapsulate what has been the impact of an organization like Mava. So one, as I said, that I have mentored several young men and boys. They have reached out to several thousands and lakhs of their peers and adolescent boys in the community, and we are gradually developing, deepening the impact of our work by more and more partnerships with civil society bodies, educational institutions, pan India. And I'm happy to say that the Harvard University South Asia Institute, they documented our work, especially this youth initiative, and which I think I had sent it as a learning resource to be shared by Arjun among all of you. So I'm sure you would get a chance to see that. So this is my last slide where the coordinates of Mava are there. So any one of you wanting to connect us and contribute your bit towards our cause, they are more than welcome. So our website, our email ID, all is there. So I'll stop here. Uh, Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'll be happy if there are some questions or comments, anyone for shorter time. Uh, Thank you, Vibhuti.
Thank you, sir, for your invaluable insights during this session, for focusing on essential aspects, including the importance of bringing men and boys when it comes to addressing gender based violence and the role played by MAVA in doing so. I would now like to invite our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, for her remarks on the address.
Thank you, Mr. Harish Sadani, for such a vivid description of 33 years of Mava's work. We have seen you and know how popular you are in educational institution. But when you conduct the workshop, like how do you, because we have seen that right from the teachers to administrators to authorities, all of them have gender stereotypes, no? Who think that man is a hunter and woman is a will pray, or so how do you make them unlearn? Because you talked about learning, unlearning, and reflection. So what makes them reflect? No, whether you use theater or individual journey or rational emotive behavior therapy, what are the tools, psychological, emotional tools you use so that men who are generally not ready to speak on these issues, they open up? So I wanted that. And your publications. Can you introduce some of your publications in regional language as well as in English, and how the newspapers are responding, mainstream newspapers are responding to your work?
Yeah, we employ a wide tool of methods, right from interactive workshops. We believe that if you want to engage men and boys, they need to be connected to the issue. They need to relate to, when you ask about gender or gender contemporary happenings, they should feel that they have something to do with themselves, with that issue. So, for that, we what we do is participatory exercises, where there is where they can talk their minds and they can listen to new ideas about masculinity, ideas about men. So for that we may use a participatory exercise where certain games are there, certain, like for example, understanding privileges of a man. You use what is called as a male privilege bingo, a game where you list down certain privileges and ask them, is this applicable to you? Then people will put up their hands, and you will find that there are some men who will put up their hand even, and there are other men who are not putting up their hand. So in other aspects they are disadvantaged, and some men are advantaged, so what we call as intersectionality. So I and my team, when I started 20 years ago, we did not had on a platter. We evolved these exercises, and I'm so happy that they are now time and tested. They have been used in the field around 25, 30. And the good news I wanted to tell, that Mava is right now in the process of developing this comprehensive manual where we will put down all these exercises. While there have been manuals in place, but we thought from a perspective and lens of differently thinking men, and we if we can put, and along with that, some recommended readings, reference readings, some of the scripts of street plays that has evolved, we thought why not put them at one place so that anyone can use them. So it's a mix of theater, experimental theater, as you said, and also films. We found, like usually people use videos, short videos in workshops and all, but we realized a film festival gives that space when a slice of the spectrum, because you need to see some films not just on gender based violence on women, but also on toxic masculinity, on lgbtqia issues, homophobia, transphobia. So when one gets a sense that they are all interconnected, and one has to have perspective over all these, then so I find films, and as you said rightly, even getting trans activists interface. So that interface also helps to clear some understanding, and it gives a new fresh insights as to how you have been looking at that issue, and now you got a new dimension. So I find a wide range of methodologies is what we employ. And the publications, so Purush Spandana is a word in Marathi. So it means men's expressions. And the literal meaning is, of course, expressions from the heart. Spandan, heartbeats. So Purush Spandan means expressions. So, and I added an adage to that, Manuspanacha Vatevarchi. I mean, on the path of humanness. So, this is a magazine, as I said, by men, of men, for men, started since 96. And, it's an annual Ank, so some of you who know in Marathi, in Maharashtra, there is a parampara, a tradition of Diwali Ank. And it is 100+ years old tradition that some 200, 300 magazines come out in the market, where there are articles, stories, poems, first person account, research writings, surveys. And we thought that why not bring out a magazine which will reach out to men, so actually men who were from the 90s, and who belong to a certain privilege, but they were willing to share their journeys so that other men can also relate. And it began with that, but I'm happy to say that today first generation writers, and while 80%, 85% of the articles contributions are by men, 15 to 20% contributions are by women, by trans people. So people know in India, when we talk about trans people's issue, little bit awareness about who's a trans woman may be there because of religion and mythology. You have characters who have been there in Mahabharata, Ramayana, and all. But trans man is largely their situation is invisibilized. So we find that through films and through first person writings in a magazine like ours. We had last year an article by an intersex person. Now, what is the journey of an intersex person who is a feminist? Daniel Mendonça, Daniela is now her name. She was a Daniel prior to that. So what has been a journey? So I find different methodologies are being employed. uh, I see here Seema has written a comment. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So South Delhi, we are more than happy to have programs designed, and reaching out to different. So as I said, I was talking to Arjun yesterday that when we release the manual that on which we are working in May, we want to have gender roundtable conferences, meets in 4, 5 cities of India, where we will not just release the manual but also showcase some important promising work done working with men and boys, so that others can get encouragement and they can start work with men in their respective community. And we are more than happy to do even TOTs, training of trainers, workshops, region wise, for organization wise, especially those organizations working with youth. We'll be more than happy because we have a rich experience in that level. So we'll be more than happy to collaborate and take this advance our mission. So thank you. uh, so I'm sure, I think you have other 2 sessions, uh, but if there is anyone wants to comment or
Natty Lopez.
Oh, hi, Nati. It's a familiar face and a name, because College of Social Work Nirmala Niketan, has been home, for me. And I had interacted with Nati there. So I'm glad
Harish
that
sir,
she's.
nice to hear you after a long time. But it was reviving, like, and just wanted to ask
Your voice is.
because mostly Sakya, I am in college.
Yeah, yeah, I
My
can hear.
voice. Can you hear
Now I
me?
can hear. Now I can. Now
Yeah.
I can. Yeah.
Now we
My
can.
I have little internet connection problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 I
we
can.
can hear you.
So here I could see the your sessions evolving, building a perspective among young men is very much like that I could see how you in the villages or in the communities, because there we now as you said, we work in a curative aspect while when the women survivor comes to us, but same time if we want zero violence at the community level, how we could work like no. So to get the people means it is a very slow process because the mentality or a patriarchy is so strong, as you said, in the governance, religion, uh, this is there. So can you narrate or share your experience in dealing at the community youth or something?
Yeah, I think, you made a very important point. So apart from work in colleges, universities, we need to work with the neighborhoods. So there have been experiments done where, you have representatives of the community. You can form a network of elderly men, retired people, which will include even some elderly women from the community, like the zero tolerance. I think Vibhuti might know that, Neelam Gore started as an experiment of, you in the area where you are, the region where you ensure that if you want zero tolerance, then how you can empower the local community. Like, we developed a pool of volunteers in the community who will, wherever necessary, take professional help. I remember Kalindi Muzumdar, one of our stalwarts, she used to tell that, it is possible that the residents of a colony, or even as you said, in rural areas, the village has functionaries. No, they have, Panchayati Raj. Apart from Panchayati Raj, elderly men, vigilant people, can play a role, and you can have representatives of adolescent men also in that. But they meet periodically. So you and I, practitioners, interventionists, we can strengthen those kinds of initiative which are sprung from the community. And you have to also let them know what are their limitations, when they should contact a professional, right? So a telephone helpline, for example, often you find in domestic violence cases, if timely at the initial phase, when an incident has occurred, at that time, if you take the help of the helpline, it is all the more effective and long term, giving that kind of support which is necessary. But at the fag end, when things have already escalated, then a helpline or community support group will not be able to give much. But at a preventive level, as you can understand, that they all have a role to play. If so that's the, I think, and there are experiments done elsewhere also, in different other countries also. Say no to violence, the white ribbon campaign, some of which started, it began just symbolically putting as a white ribbon on the day when there were girls massacred in Toronto. And Michael Kaufman started that, and it spread from one place to unions in organizations. So from a symbolic to actually proactively running campaigns, longer intervention programs. So I think, and it's all voluntarily effort, and now the white ribbon campaign has spread from one continent to 3 or 4 other continents, including Australia. So I think, and Michael Kaufman is very humbly telling that I was the initiator. And so it is a people's response, how they take it up, how they spread it. The Bell Bajao campaign, for example, some of started by Breakthrough in Delhi. It began as a people's initiative, and in several languages it was translated, I've been told. The spot advertisements and the albums which were created through that Manke Manjire songs, and Babul. So I think these are methods which can be used, tools which can be used by lay people also. I remember when Mawa was born in 93, Yaqub Sayed, he was working that time in Lintas, so he developed what is called radio play, which means audio. Now you have the word podcast and all, but in those days it was a recorded kind of a message or a program which we used to play at BDD Chawls in Mumbai, in Worli, near the Doordarshan Kendra. A series, there are several chawls and buildings, and we did that neighborhood conscientization program where the lay public was engaged. So I think these are examples, and people can develop. And as I said, the TOTs, training of trainers, is what Mava would be happy to do. Wherever you want to make an experiment, but you should realize why difference between working with women and men. What is the important difference that in case of women and girls, even right from the first interaction or session, there is a sense of liberation those women will have. They find that this is giving them something. For men who have been enjoying privileges for years, for them to realize the importance of the program, it will take a while. So are you willing to, I use the keyword invest. Are you willing to invest in men or boys, or just want to do one workshop or one program and stop it there? Attitudinal change, mindset change is not going to happen with few sessions. So, I it calls for serious intervention. If one is crystal clear, and so I, in my TEDx talk, if some of you can read that, see that talk, which is available on YouTube, I have said that working with the disadvantaged on one side and transformation of the so-called powerful, these two cannot be mutually exclusive agendas. Both are equally important. And I think all the members of the cohort can see for yourself how much work is being done among men and boys. What is the percentage? Any guess? 85-90% of the work is being done among women and girls by and large. And I'm not saying that that should stop. But if along with that you don't work with men and boys, the future is going to be bleak. We wouldn't like offer such a society where women are confident and assertive of their rights, and men feel threatened and do not know how to respond. They fumble when ordinary women are asserting. Would we like such a society? That's a question we and all have to ask, collectively. And so therefore each one has a role to play, to work for that vision of a society which is gender equal and just for all, not just for women, but for men, for non-binary individuals, other queer identity people, right? So I think we should, it calls for a paradigm shift in the way we have been looking at these things over the years.
Uh,
I think
does MAVA have any agenda to reach out to Parent Teachers Association of schools, and also training of school teachers on gender issues? Because these are the formative years, and what we do in WDC in colleges and universities, it is too late to change the mindset. No? So early childhood education and also school education, how do you target?
Yeah, so what has happened in Mumbai, we worked with the municipal corporation's education department some years ago and did a lot of intervention work with select schools. And as you said, even some meetings where we were having a small office in a Mumbai municipal school, we try to involve the parents from time to time, have interactions with them, talk about individual cases of alcoholism, absenteeism of parents, and relate that with domestic violence and gender. So we have been doing experiments, but sadly speaking, the kind of support or collaboration we were expecting from the municipal corporation, we didn't get. I'm sad to say that we were shunted out from our office after 12
All
years.
NGOs were shunted out. We in Bacha also we were shunted out.
And the
Akshara
reason
was
saying
shunted
that
out.
our work is not related to education.
Correct.
Gender sensitivity work not related to education, but we have still not disheartened. I must tell you some positive thing. UNICEF has realized this, and so therefore, as you rightly said, catch them young. So in Usmanabad district, since last year, we have started work with the teachers and parents of secondary and upper secondary schools in one block. And I'm happy to say that use of film screenings and workshops, with them has really, in fact, Swayam Shikshan Prayog, an organization working of single women largely, they engaged Mava's team so that they would reach out to the school children and their parents in the community. So, we have organized trainings, and, I think, one of our friends, Manish Kumar, who runs a Gali Band Abhiyan in Gorakhpur.
Yeah.
And imagine the word Gali Band, and it's coming from Gorakhpur, so necessary. He was able to demonstrate for at least 10, 12 years that the not just the schools and the administrators, but even the parents, if they are engaged gainfully, and involved in the process, then you can work towards that collective change. So, a series of efforts were made to involve the parents, teachers, that the fortnight which I was telling, 25th November till the 10th of December, Chuppi Todo kind of campaign, stop the silence surrounding the violence, those kind of campaigns, where lay people can also be involved. Those have to be thought of innovatively, by all interventionists. So I think this working with the parents, teachers, and I think because they are an important influence in shaping, impressionable young boys.
Thank you, sir, for the address and patiently answering all our questions. We look forward to seeing you in our future IMPRI events as well.
I had a question.
Yes.
Sure.
Mr. Harish, are you people working, because most of my 40 years, 20, 30 years have worked with men in Tihar jail and with Delhi police. Are you working with the police and prisoners in Bombay or wherever?
Yeah, we did several rounds of training with Prayas as an organization you might be knowing that works in, one of my batchmate, like colleague, Vijay Raghavan, who did masters in social work along with me from the TIS. So we approached them and we did strengthening of their understanding on gender and patriarchy. The idea was that after that there should be series of interventions happening within the prison system, which I believe they are continuing with that. So as and when they need, they should be able to approach us, and because they have access, they are working regularly with the prisoners, the under trial, not just juvenile delinquent but also women. So they tried to involve us, but for a long time we have not heard from them. But we'll be more than happy. And actually in Tihar and other places in Delhi, we were trying to reach out to some civil society bodies so that we do some innovative kind of intervention program, with the prisoners there. Because I think art based therapy has a lot, having catharsis, using dance as a medium, for the juvenile delinquents or men who are, you want to break the cycle of violence, so abroad, unfortunately in India, those kind of experiments of the civil society with the judiciary, and other stakeholders coming together, so there are, for example, in Australia there's a program breaking the cycle where the judges will allow a juvenile delinquent or a first time offender to undergo series of intervention workshops, and after successfully they have shown some improvement in their behavior, then accordingly there is a dialogue happening with the judiciary, with the civil society, and accordingly the sentencing is condoned or reduced. So I find, you had films like Do Aake Barahat and all, which talked about prison reforms and the, so unfortunately that reformatory um, aspect, where you are talking about the curative part, that has not been so much interrogated and explored. While there are some, I think in Bangalore also there are some organizations working, but there are, it calls for a long term intervention, at least 2 to 3 years, when you invest in a particular group of men, whether they are prisoners or at the workplace. You have to give that time. And I find, when, as talking about policies and programs, this cohort, I think we need to realize that investment of time and effort. I remember Manisha Gupte, our dear friend, she said that often people ask that resources are scarce. We don't have resources to reach out to women, and you're talking about reaching out to men. So she said the question was not about financial resources. Even if 80% you invested in women and 15 to 20% in men and boys, things wouldn't have been as bad as they are today. So, it's the question about that perspective and that thought that, this is also important. Simultaneously, it calls for investment. And I think that paradigm shift, so as future policy makers, I find that more than the ministers allotting resources for reaching out to young boys and men, it is bureaucrats, it is servants who have certain pragmatism and perspective, or people who are are influential consultants in terms of advising policy making. Because the thought, sadly speaking, the wider level thought that you need to invest long term in men, that is solely missing. I must tell you, despite all my talk and the effort what our organization, is a drop in the ocean what we are doing. If you see the wider scenario in our country, this thought itself has to be talked at in wider discourse in schools, universities, and even at the community level. So I think,
No, and I think also there are hardly any masculinity studies.
right.
Even in social science department, you don't have. So I think integrating these concerns into the foundation courses of universities and colleges is very important. Other thing is that child rights organizations have objected to the term juvenile delinquent. And they say it should be child in conflict with law because of the circumstances which force children to behave like that. So the burden should not be on the child, but it should be on the circumstances, and we need to change that. So I think that is but I think bringing it, are you working with the Board of Studies and some of the where the syllabus is also discussed, and where the masculinity studies or some of the topics which MAVA has been tackling can be integrated into the proper mainstream courses as well as foundation courses or certificate and diploma courses? Yeah.
So I'm happy to say that my team member Altamash has been in touch with certain colleges and universities, and we have been able to do certificate courses, you know, and also some universities as a part of their, the Pune University has this courses on gender, so they invite us to conduct some modules. But as you rightly said, apart from Radhika Chopra from the Delhi,
Yeah.
she started a course specifically, as a part of gender studies on masculinities, and abroad you find such courses are there beyond one or two institutions. So I think wherever there is women studies centers or gender studies, which are across different cities in India, we need to inculcate in that, incorporate in that how working with men and boys, can be a part of understanding gender.
What do you think about the course in Pune University by Mangesh ji, Professor Mangesh?
So
He
I think,
has written a book on masculinity.
He has written a book, but I think the Kranti Jyoti, Sri Abhyas Kendra, which is there, they are running some shorter duration courses where a large number of men also have been attending of late, participating, and they had asked us that in the course content, if they can include some modules, exercises on masculinities, but I think it is still at a nascent stage, like in India. There has to be not just tokenism, but the full understanding. You have had Raven Connell, which is a leading authority whenever Connell and gender and politics, right? No sociologist in India can afford to miss her name. So, when people are talking about gender, power, and masculinity, she was the first person. She was earlier, as some of you know, Rob Connell, she was a male, and she had transitioned. So Raven Connell has talked about four types of masculinities. She talked about hegemonic masculinity, then marginalized masculinity, co-opted masculinity, complicit masculinities. Now this is considering the white Australian male. She did studies and she made her observations. But in India, there has been no such studies. There are, of course, forms and different kinds of masculinities, but it's all, some. In fact, there is an organization, Mara, in Bangalore, that has taken the effort to do an in-depth study on what is, when it comes to constructive construction of masculinity, what is being done and what are the gaps. So understanding the fragile masculinity, the vulnerable kinds of masculinities also is something which has to be explored, interrogated, while the understanding of dominant hegemonic masculinity need to be questioned and challenged, right? But other forms of masculinity and the intersections of gender with caste, class, and other forms of inequality also is not happening to the level it should be. So these are all areas of further study and interrogation.
I wanted to just add few things. If am I allowed?
Yeah,
Professor
yeah.
Vib? So just wanted to share. I'm from Delhi School of Social Work, 82 batch, and I have two house husbands. As I don't know the better word for it. If you remember the Car Key movie.
Yeah,
So one is in Australia, one is in the US. My daughters work with Breakthrough, that Bell Bajao, and the other daughter is in Australia Social Work School. And three of us are really very, very empowered women because of my husband. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to share.
that's nice to note.
Very.
And actually, we need to develop and strengthen this progeny. We need to expand and amplify our work. We need to share, humbly, whatever journeys, the men in your lives have used for transformation. I think that needs to be told to other men, no? I think
Very
in a
important.
humble way. And I think that's how that karwa will grow, no?
Grow.
I mean, that
Very
moment where we want, these are, I, for example, I was writing, I was told, Vibhuti knows this, like 2 years ago, Lok Satta, a very prominent newspaper, the Indian Express Group, asked me to write a fortnightly articles on men of substance, such men who are standing up for women's rights and who are redefining masculinity in their own way. So initially, as Vibhuti might recollect, I was hesitant because I thought there will be very few men. Will I really get to write a column for a year? And which means at least 25, 26 men. But I'm happy to say some 23 men I was able to identify across the length and breadth of the country. And these are not just organization related men, right? Or working in the development sector. Some of them are lawyers, some of them are, in diverse fields. police officer from Telangana, started work on not just anti-trafficking using what is there in the law, but he went beyond the call of duty. Those girls who are trafficked, he showed them a new life, a new beginning. Alternative livelihood is what, that is not supposedly work of a police officer, but he did it as a call of duty. So I think there are examples we need to multiply of ordinary men. And I'm happy to say that Rashmi Lamba, one of my team members, really saw that those 22 stories that I wrote 2 years ago, she felt that shorter films can be made on them. And I'm happy to even share here that a first pilot which we made on a guy called Nelson Deb. He is actually the original, the original pad man we all know is a person from Coimbatore, right? Arunachalam. But Nelson, a 36-year-old guy currently from Assam, took inspiration from that padman and started an enterprise that will produce quality products related to sanitary pads. And not just that, but at a preventive level, his work with men, talking about menstruation and the taboos associated with men, that is path breaking. If a 36-year-old man who has no background in social work, his background is fashion designing, check out his journey in Google, Nelson Deb. So I think we need to really amplify these voices, and we don't have to look at icons which are bigger names. Ordinary men who take up the stands for women in their lives, I think those can become voices, and we need to expand those voices, amplify those voices in whatever way we can, and that's how I think, you know, there are women in this group just now listening. They also can ensure this process where we are on one side empowering women and girls, but at the same time talking to the men in our lives. Girls from colleges and universities ask me that we can talk anything under the sun, in our own college, whatever spaces we have. But I ask them, do you talk about these topics, contemporary gender happenings, with the men in your lives? What do you think must be the answer? Do they talk? They are not talking, because unless you talk about what is happening around with the men in your lives, whether it's your work colleague, whether it's your husband or spouse or your child, I think start with yourself to be that change what you want to see in the wider level. So I think, it can have a ripple effect, but somewhere people have to start, and it calls for multi-pronged, multifaceted approach. So I think everyone can play a role. The small films that you see, a film like Animal, for example, can be used to generate the discussion um, around masculinity, right? Use a cultural medium which is available to you, and talk to the men in your lives. What do they think about the film? I think it's that way you will provoke them, and you will come to know their minds. Because Vibhuti, you might know that there was a play Sachat Gharat in Marathi, which means before 7, before dark, come at home. That was the name of a play and the name of a film, in which a scene is there where a college going girl is relating to an incident what happened in Pune, and she's asking her boyfriend, her close male friend studying in the same college, that if something like this happens to me, an incident which had happened to a girl in that contemporary Pune, this girl from a college is asking her boyfriend, and the boyfriend said that if such a thing happens, I will disown you. Now, had the girl not talked about it, she wouldn't have come to know the mind
Correct.
of someone whom she thought was on equal, right? So unless people talk about it, so the posh act also, we realize that the first level of conversations that need to happen among work colleagues, that is missing. The act and its salient features, everybody's talking, right? But the culture of talking about what is harassment, what is masculinity, what is toxic and what is non-toxic, what is consent and what is dissent, that has to be interrogated with the male colleagues in the workplace environment. So I think there are now mechanisms through which we can intervene, we can engage the men in our midst and take the process forward. Uh, I think Seema has said, I cannot watch animal, which is true. In fact, some of my team members said, by watching one animal, you are creating many animals, right? But can't we use it for a discourse? That's the question. You may not be watching, but do you know that there are lakhs and lakhs of girl students who like that famous film? What was that film? Singh, Kabir Singh, right? It was not the male students who liked it. A large number of girl students felt that a man has to be little bit possessive. So what is your answer to that? You may not agree, but remember that a majority of the people are influenced by that. So use that as a pretext to generate conversations, right? And at the same time, as you rightly said, alternate cinema. Show other kinds of films to them, but leaving it aside that it will change. There are intersectionality when we talk Kerala stories, sister stories, and the films which give a misguided and a misrepresented approach on gender. I think has we have to take a call, we have to take a stand. You can't be oblivious, you can't keep it aside and say that others are watching and so I don't have to talk about it. You have to proactively take certain what are contemporarily happening, and
Yeah, the problem is that we have limited resources and how to utilize them best in a positive way and nurturing the minds which are open to gender equality. So that is why instead of just because in every rank there are betrayers. Like, Abraham Lincoln was killed by a slave only, former slave.
Yeah.
So slaves are enjoying slavery. We have ample examples from the history. But why would I invest my energy in that? No, when I know that there are so many important things, there are so many young adolescent girls who are waiting to fly, and I would use my energy. So I think that also.
Yeah, it's very challenging time, and what happens is multiple inequalities are working simultaneously.
Correct.
So you find that people are passionate. Somebody would say, I am interested in patriarchy and I have nothing to do with casteism.
Correct.
Such kind of approach is I would say that the enemy there is laughing that we are working in silos.
No, and I have experienced that while organizing when I was teacher coordinator at TISS. Like you have a School of Development Studies where you are trying to see that all intersectionally vulnerable, marginalized interests are represented, and you do the session plan. So first session plan is on the macro policies, how they are neoliberal macro policies which are creating problems for the. So you would get a certain type of people in the hall. As soon as there is a tea break and the session on gender starts, all of them are gone and the new people will come. Then you have a post-lunch session, which is on the Dalit rights. So again, these people who are interested in gender issues, they would leave and the Dalit activists would come. After that, you have something on creative. So I think this kind of what you call silos, are already there, how to break them and create the network. And at least some of them, if they are good networkers, who can see to it that at a major like common issues, we come together on the same platform as it used to happen in the 80s and 90s, which currently is not happening. Like we had a national conference on communalism where women were not there. And when we had a national conference on personal laws, none of the secular people were there. So you are discussing the religion-based personal laws, and you are also also seeing that how communalism is creating more and more solidification of discriminatory laws. But both the lobbies, the progressive people at and the women's organization, how to see how you ensure their convergence and coming on the same platform, no? Which Asghar Ali Saab could do because he was gender sensitive and he was also very popular among the progressive and secular humanist people. So I think we need those kind of people who
Yeah, and
can be the good
spaces
networker.
have to be proactively created, you know, from time to time, meetings, spaces of solidarity, taking a stand. You know, like somebody who would say that my work is confined, my mandate of my organization is limited. One can understand and respect that, but the thought of the holistic picture, and that I need to build solidarity with the other movements,
Correct.
if that is lacking, then you know it's a big question mark. You know,
Yeah.
like we need to ensure that, you know, like section 377, the
Yeah.
judgment on homosexuality, you know, I felt that the other movements did not took up a stand when the judgments were given, whether in the Delhi earlier judgment or the Supreme Court judgment. So, you know, you find that one movement and the other movement, the interrelationships and moments of solidarity and support can be actually thought of in a very, you know, organized way. At least periodic spaces and meetings have to be there, you know, across the spectrum, because that's what is, as I said, the multiple identities, multiple inequalities, you know, thriving together. So similarly, our response also should be, you know, somewhere, while we may be focused on a particular issue and our mandates, but you know, we should see the larger picture. I think that
And
vision.
for that, I think the
Yeah.
culture of study circle which existed when we were growing up, no, that also has to be
The
reinstituted because
Abhyasikas of
now it has
studying.
gone. So you do it issue-based activism, but then the holistic perspective and seeing interconnections you don't see. Like in the 80s, we had a StreeNet, no, which was 6 women's organization from 6 different cities were running the course, and people used to get very good. It was a comprehensive, or Sangat's work in South Asia, where they brought women or activists from 8 countries together on a platform for a 6-week program. All those things have now disappeared, and that's why we see that people don't even know each other face to face or this, and that then without knowing the person, you always have fear of the unknown, no, and you don't. You have several doubts on coming on the same platform. So the culture of study circle also has to be fostered.
Yeah, I
Ishmeet,
think
you want
Dr.
to speak?
Yashwant Sumant also was, you know, sharing this idea of, you know, having study circles, abhyasikas, you know, where even in the women's movement, when women's movement was informed by the strong, you know, I mean, academics versus grassroots activism, they were informing each other. You know, when such a thing is thriving, you know, then you have moments of reflection and looking at the wider, you know, interconnections.
Yeah.
I think that is what we need to revive and inculcate and ensure such moments, you know, created.
And I think deprivatization of knowledge resources, putting them in public so that easily they can be accessible, no, that is also very important. Otherwise, some people are extremely articulate and politically correct, but then, you know, large masses of people, they just only have a whatever Bollywood offers or whatever the mainstream media churns out.
Yeah, open sources.
Yeah,
of
Ishmeet, yeah,
really-
open sources are very important. Ishmeet ji would.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful, thought-provoking session. I've been very carefully listening, and there are lots of thoughts which are in my head, but I won't be able to put them all together. I mean, otherwise I'll be eating up all the time. But I would really definitely like to begin from one, incidents in my own life where when we were growing up, my father picked up a pad and he brought to us and he said if the size was all right. And we all had a hearty laugh, at my father showing us the, pads. And then it became a kind of a, routine in family where our father would buy pads and bring them home. But this led to a certain other kind of liberation, particularly for me. And so even when we were growing up, we were in a kind of a mixed kind of an environment where we were told that, okay, if you have pain, you got to endure it and all. But when my daughter, was born and when she got into puberty, so we had told her that, okay, enduring, you don't have to endure pain. You can say I am in pain, right? You can tell everybody. And we do have a very open environment at home where my husband and, my daughter, there's nothing to hide about, periods particularly. But at the same time, when I try to engage in a certain kind of a talk with her, there is a certain kind of a societal pressure. She wouldn't want to talk about it. So this is something which she's getting from outside, and when they were children, she wouldn't want to play with boys. So because my daughter is she was very tender. She hated violence, so the boys would sometimes hit. So she didn't want to play with boys, and she was like, no, I mean, ye to marte hain, inke saath nahi khelna. And she had, she built a image in mind that boys will beat, and we were like quite, I mean, I was very upset that why is she getting these ideas, and it's very slowly that I had to get her out of this. So one is that we create a family space where the home, becomes a safe unit, for girls, and it becomes a space where they can be, in whatever they are experiencing. Two is like, I also teach a course called Women Writing in Practice. And this is a course which is an optional course, but it becomes mandatory for the first year students because we are not able to give them choice. And when all the boys come in, so they, in a way, the first class is that they hate this course. So they're like, okay, they are going to talk about women and, we're going to read this, even if we don't want to. And the first lecture that I engage with them is that I ask them that, I mean, is patriarchy only, are we talking about patriarchy's damage only to women, or has patriarchy in any ways damaged men also? And we, in a way, talk about how difficult patriarchy has been for men. So I never begin with women rights. I never begin with, feminism. I always begin with, how damaging patriarchy is for men. And then we come on to feminism. And by the time, our introductory sessions are over, these boys, I mean, they're very few in number, but because English studies has lesser boys and more girls. So, but they are sensitized and then they begin enjoying the course. And it was really elating for me when in one of the batches, a group of boys had organized the Women's Day for, their classmates. So I think one thing where we have failed, is that as feminists, we've not been able to reach to men, on a larger scale within society. And the most hated word amongst men is feminism or feminist. So the moment you say I am a feminist, they hate you. They feel you are just totally against, them. And we are those who are going to protest. झंडे उठा के जाने वाले हैं, right? हम कभी घर वालों के साथ adjust नहीं करेंगे. So this is how laymen, kind of think about us. So, but I've got a lot of ideas from your talk today, particularly, the Bell Bajao campaign, small little videos we can put in and say that, okay, if you feel this, go and ring the bell. And maybe like, we've been talking about hand holding, throughout the course. So even in our society groups, it would be a very good idea to, in fact, put in small little quotes, which are sensitizing quotes, but very, very small little quotes. Let's teach our men, let's be there for girls, or maybe something like, give situations and ask people to discuss. And so, I mean, there have been a lot of things around us because I remember there were two women smoking once in our shoppers area where there was a huge discussion in society that women are, on the society group, that women are smoking. हमारे बच्चों पे गलत प्रभाव पड़ रहा है. And so I was the one who initiated and I asked them that when men smoke, तो क्या आपके बच्चों पे गलत प्रभाव नहीं पड़ता? आज औरत को स्मोक करते देख के आपके बच्चों पे गलत प्रभाव कैसे पड़ रहा है? And but I was amazed to see that a lot of women joined me in this. You know, when I was being bullied, so a lot of women, you know, joined me in this, and they talked about, you know, how men behave. So I feel sometimes we have to also sensitize these groups, you know, where all kinds of discussions are happening, but we are hardly talking about, you know, questions of gender. So,
I agree. So, like how you trigger off conversations using something contextual, something contemporary, from time to time. You don't have to, have a deliberation for a longer time. Use that particular moment to trigger, what is happening in an incident around you. Use that to talk with the men in your lives. So as you said rightly, you gave examples also. Along with Vibhuti, I would like to say that, while working with men and boys for a long time with the women's movement, it wasn't on their agenda. We must understand it was historical reasons. There were several women who had given chances for men to change their outlook, and they had, what they got was bitter experiences. So so this is a something, while today there are women's rights activists like Manisha and all who say that, while they have comprehensive programs reaching out to women, at least one program they will ensure will reach out to men and boys also. So we have come like a full circle. While other women's groups are observing, activists are taking a note of what is happening, they might have not had energies or resources. They are focused on working with a target group of women and girls, which is understandable. And there are on the fence, some women's activists and academicians are also taking a note. Our role is to bounce them with our development, with our ideas, so they will take a note. And since you had Flavia Agnes as one of the leading speakers here, I must tell you my own example. When in 1993 Mawa was born, initially she had that particular policy sort of that no men invited at her office. Even if a brother brings a distressed sister, he should bring her, leave her, and go away. So so and all that, I remember talking to Vibhuti and others, that bitterness has come through long experiences, not just one or two times, but several times they have seen what sort of responses men were giving. So, and we must understand in today's times, as I said rightly, leaving work, not working with men and boys, the future is going to be bleak. You and most importantly, organizations like Mawa, activists have shown the pathway, in the sense like Manisha and all say that we have to take a pause, listen to what Harish has done, what has worked, what has not worked, right? What are the gaps? So I think that kind of liberal approach is what, pragmatic approach is what we need to share and widen, that what is working. At the same time, we have to be also cautious. There are men's rights groups also mushrooming in our country, right, which are on a woman bashing agenda. They are the ones celebrating Men's Day. Don't forget that if tomorrow any one of you in this group are invited that 19th of November, let's celebrate Men's Day, they might say that let's celebrate with a positive approach. But you and I have to ask that when you give credence to a day and say that it is Men's Day, search on Google, you will find the history, how it started. Somebody wanted to salute to his father and started that day abroad. And so the history of what it is for a Women's Day, the genesis, if you see what happened in Chicago when girls, tailoring women, had come on the streets, there is a history, right? Is there a history for Men's Day in that sense, that to understand what is the situation of men today, let's seriously understand without pointing fingers at women, that they are responsible for the increasing suicides on men. So, you find these men's rights groups are twisting the figures and the facts, telling that a large number of men are today having a difficult time. It's because of women.
Hmm.
So, you have to be cautious of such groups, and at the same time, not take a stand like a savior. We men, protection, uh, the word protectionist kind of approach, you must have learned that there are three forms of equality, right? One is formal, which remains on paper. Somebody saying that, पुरुष काम पे जाते हैं सवेरे से लेके रात तक, औरत भी जा सकती है, किसने रोका है?
Hmm.
But not taking into account ensuring that women go to work, that is not formal. Formal means formal, what is applicable to men can be applicable to women, but you are not taking into account what are the specific needs of the target group. So that is formal. Protectionist is saying that pehle aap sort of culture, where we are there to protect. So we have to be very cautious and clarify. I use a kind of a disclaimer clearly saying that men are not to protect the bodies of women.
True.
Men should be there to protect the rights which they have been enjoying, the rights of women, which are public rights, which are human rights, which the men have been enjoying for years, right? And you can give example, right to mobility, right? We are not saying that there is curtailment on your mobility. If you are enjoying that right to mobility, it's that you have to ensure for the women in your lives, right? So I think that we have to be, while working with men and boys, I think these are the different underpinnings we have to keep in mind, that what is our approach. Some, and also as you said rightly, with the women's movement also, the discourse has to be happening. While there are, as Vibhuti will know, and some of you might know, that the, the national meet of women in, I think it was in Kolkata or where, they had said, no men will be allowed. I mean, it's completely. So, you have and I have to realize that there are some spaces only for women, some spaces only for men, also, I would say, for them to open up and realize, and some spaces where all gendered people are there. So that kind of understanding is where we want to go to. And so therefore we must be very crystal clear that what is our approach when we say engaging men and boys. uh, and as you rightly said, that one approach is to talk about the toxic masculinity, which is impacting men also in the long run. That is definitely a strategy, but also we have to talk about how it is impacting women. So, I mean, you have to give that whole context, that patriarchy is the common enemy, and how. I'll give you one simple example. I think this is a very interesting dialogue. So, I had this Rasika Agashe. She's a well known writer, theater personality from NSD. I asked her that she should mentor my youth in coming up with a play on masculinity. And she did a play with the title she came up was Mard ko dard hota hai. And remember, the word is not mard ko bhi dard hota hai. When you say ko bhi, it has a different political connotation.
Correct.
When you say mard ko dard hota hai, as a matter of fact, mard ko dard hota hai. No denying of that. But the beauty about that play, which is calling the perspective, that Rasika ensured that the pains of a woman, a heterosexual woman, the pains of a gay man, the pains of a trans woman, and then she's coming to the pains of a heterosexual cis man in a patriarchal world where we are, how they are connected. So remember, she is not saying that, talking about the impact of patriarchy on men without touching the other pains. See what happens when heterosexual cis men realize the pain of what a woman is going through, and that they are also impacted by the same system through the rigid gender norms, then they become more empathizers for a long term engagement. Theirs will not be momentarily. They will realize the pain as a man unable to talk about their vulnerabilities, so they can empathize with other marginalized people more. So it's that you have to always remember that this kind of protectionist और ये जो है ना, ये approach से हमें दूर रहना है. I mean, in all whatever our intentions, that we want to broach this topic, break the silence, involve more and more men, but remember at the back of our mind, I mean, we need to tell that a large number of women and other gender minorities, what kind of living they are going through. The Human Development Index, we talk about human development of a society, as how we have failed, how we are ranking low. Our number is 134 or 140, not even among the first 50 or 100. And there are people who want India to be called as superpower. तो हमें ये समझाना है कि आप पॉपुलेशन की बात कर रहे हो, क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ कैसे जी रहे हैं. और जब क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ से हाफ ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन यू से वुमेन, व्हाट अबाउट द इनविजिबल पॉपुलेशन जो दिखता ही नहीं है, क्या वो जी नहीं रहे हैं और कैसे जी रहे हैं. So I think we have to connect the dots and give the wider picture, holistic picture in any long-term engagement, around gender-based discrimination. Now, the words, what we were talking earlier about VAW, wow, from there we came to GBV. And even in GBV, some people would say that it's not just gender-based violence on women. And rightfully, it should be seen in a wider sense. It can be, when you say gender-based violence, it can be violence on anyone, any gendered person, no? Because if you are not talking about binaries, if you are talking about on a trans man, what kind of violence is happening, that also has to be examined. You cannot say that I will just talk only about a heterosexual cis woman's plight. And those which are invisibilized. See, one side census and others haven't come up with figures, and so there is underreporting, and so therefore people will say, what is the percentage? It's not even less than 1% or 2%. You and I have to argue, whether it's 1% or in society, when we are talking about harmony and living peacefully coexisting, so one has to keep on talking about the intersectionality and look with that intersectional feminist lens. And also the earlier word, people, I think Vibhuti can expand this, that people misnomer feminism is a misused word. There is no denying, but I must tell you, we have to all use it as an opportunity to tell what I mean by as a feminist. Pro-feminist man is a word which is in vogue, right? Pro-feminist man. When people say feminist woman, I mean, it's understood that feminist means a woman looking at from her perspective, right? That's a Narivad. So doesn't mean, I mean, on the face of it, going by the name Narivad, हमें नारियां दिख रही हैं, उनके पर्सपेक्टिव से दुनिया को देख रही हैं, but it doesn't shun that men are aloof or not part of that, no? So I mean, if we expand this, that our enemy is not men but the male dominated mindset which is at the core, which can be even in a woman, right? The male dominated mindset can be even in a woman, right? Who is at the workplace, you find that she may be in a superior position and men can be subordinated, right? So we have to keep on telling how we should realize crystal clear that our, just as the fight for casteless society, our enemy is not Brahmins but Brahmanism. When Ambedkar burnt the Manusmriti, So many of his Savarna friends were standing besides. So people forget that his message was loud and clear, not just talking about religion, how it subordinates women, but telling that, look, my Savarna friends are also in my fight, collaborators. They are my supporters. My enemy is not Brahmin. So I think, people have just misreading or limited. Jyotiba Phule was said that he is working only for the oppressed women, but he was the one who started a strike of nai. क्या बोलेंगे उनको नाई को
Barbers.
barber strike. Now that was for the Brahmin women whose heads were shaved when their husbands had died. If people would have said Jyotiba was only for the oppressed or marginalized caste people,
He was from a
why
gardener
would he,
community, Mali.
why would he do for the Brahmin women's this kind of a strike? Mobilizing all the barbers that they should come together and nobody should shave off, and that practice was stopped. So I mean, the larger picture what Jyotiba was trying to constantly tell of a casteless, classless, gender just society, I think that is what we need to put in the larger frame, that they are all today, sadly speaking, I wouldn't give name, but somebody who is working for the rights of the queer people, uh, you must be knowing whom I'm referring, is a big Islamophobe. The way he rants on social media, and he is the
Yes.
chairperson of a well-known trust, the first in India to have started working for homosexual people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you can say that I'm passionate and talking about the rights of homosexual, but it's because of Christians and Muslims that today where we are, is this what he's been talking day in and out, and nobody, and there are activists who say that, but he is doing some good work for queer people. He's doing good work, but this kind of damage he's doing in other ways, that intersectional, as an Islamophobe, I
That
think that has to be
mostly
decried. Yeah.
that mostly happens because when people in these movements also become a bit elitist,
No, no,
then
he has
kind
been like that from day one.
right. So
Yeah.
so that's the
Because even
privilege
during
and
92 riots,
elitism
he had
that
taken
leads to
that
things,
position.
because all focused movements in the two sense lead to some kind of universalism.
Correct.
So your own, a woman's pain is also understood by, a woman also understands the man's pain, in that sense. So there's a woman here in Ahmedabad, I'm from Ahmedabad, who celebrates 19th November, Women's Day. She's a journalist, and she felicitates all pro-feminist men. And she invites all kinds of men so that, this example can go on and other men can take inspiration from these men. So they come and they narrate their stories, how they have been with women, and it works very well. So that's like, of course, I mean, one focus on any of these movements should translate into a larger universal cause
No, and
for.
plus problem is that whether you announce yourself as a feminist or not, but the moment you talk of women's rights, like Miraben in 1954, she wrote Women in Modern India, very authentic research-based work. And Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay agreed to write forward, but with that she has written that she talks like a feminist. Bell Hooks says that I never announced that I'm a feminist, but the moment I talk about women's rights, people, they call me that I'm a feminist. No. So this is how it is. Yeah. You challenge the power structure and then you are labeled as well. Because it is very difficult for those who have enjoyed privileges for so long, to give up those privileges and share power. After all, it's a question of sharing power. Yeah. She also says she'll connect with you. Yeah. Chat. Fine. Yeah.
Yes, I also feel that, this thing to even express gratitude, towards men or anybody for that matter who is with you in this fight is also very, very important.
Correct.
Sometimes little acts, of, any kind, anybody who stands with you, holds your hand, is quite a lot of help. and the precedence that it sets, it helps quite a bit. Another friend, I mean, these are all personal cases that I'm talking about. Another friend, she was brought up by her bua because she didn't have her parents. And when it was a time to, when she was called for property sharing, her, mother's family offered her something. So she was on the verge of denying that. I mean, they were offering her, so it was not they were taking her right. But so she's married in a very good family and all. So she was wanting to deny that. So her bua who had brought her up was also a single woman. And she told her, don't say a no. Because if you accept it, you are paving way for many other women.
Correct.
An example is kind of set. It's not about your need. It is about, that somebody is extending an hand to you on that. So an example is set for many of those who will never be given this right. So somebody might see and say, अच्छा उन्होंने उसको दिया था तो हम भी अपनी बेटी को दे देते हैं.
No, even when I went for a WDC of dental college in New Bombay, one doctor, he after the session got over and we were talking about the whole thing about the women's rights in Indian legal system and all. And he said that his father had willed away his property to him, but his own 3 children, they told him, Papa, this is not done. Then it is unjust. We need to share it with this. And he said, I had also principally agreed that whatever Papa had done, I am going to share it with my sister. And he confided that we did that, no? Though my father was a patriarch, but we did not abide by that, no? What he said. I think things are changing, yes.
Yeah, but in
Slightly, but
places
yes.
like Maharashtra, you still have brothers making the sisters write the Bakshis Patra.
Yeah, all over India, all over India. In fact, the magistrate, district magistrate in Rajasthan sent a circular on a letterhead, government letterhead, that on just one day before Raksha Bandhan, if your daughters are not ready, if your sisters don't will away their property to you, please don't allow them to tie Rakhi. And it became a big issue in Rajasthan, no? That how can a government officer send this kind of circular to all the village councils and all? He had sent it on.
So what do we do with all these like
We have to
parents
fight
and
with stigma.
fathers? Right. No, I mean, my question is, what do we do with all these fathers and mothers and brothers who are basically stealing
Yeah,
the
theft. It is
share
theft.
of their
It is
sister?
theft of the
Then there
unpaid
is no
labor.
question of love,
Correct. Yeah.
So for them, they still love us when they steal. But if we demand, then we don't.
Rights are not accepted. Gifts can be given, but not the entitlement. The question is, Dr. Amati Kumar Sen and Martha Nussbaum also talk, it's a question of entitlement, which is shunned. But okay, we can give you some gift here and there, the way we give to children, not the way we give to
Part of it.
populace. Yeah, so the power,
I think
controlling
the
power.
autonomy of women, unless it is asserted. See, you find these small courts which are there, sessions court and all. You find brothers vying for property. How many examples do you recollect where a mother or a sister has gone for their rightful share and fighting? Those are very few examples. Very few. So,
That's the only
remember
social
in
capital
the-
they have, no? And if they lose that, because you don't allow girls and women to have any contact in the outside world, so their only exposure is to the natal family and in-laws family. And if they lose out there also, then there is nobody. So I think that insecurity of losing out social contacts and social capital, because they have not been in the outside world, no?
And they've been
To
always
make
conditioned to
friends
give.
and yeah.
And they've been always conditioned to give,
Yeah.
to
So
sacrifice,
that
to
is there.
give.
Yeah. That is also,
Even
there is a
educated,
fear also, fear.
and even educated parents, like, they talk about giving 40-60 share.
Correct.
And I mean, I was discussing with another friend of mine and I was telling her that your daughter has invested so much of emotions in you. The son is abroad and the daughter is here in India. I said, what about her emotional investment? Still, you talk about giving her 40% share.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it is going to still take time, but yes, the beginning has already happened.
Happened. Correct.
So it's not a very like, disgusting situation, but slowly and steadily, I think the things are now changing. Yeah.
See, Simaji has written her comments in chat box. You can speak, Simaji. You can unmute and speak. Yes.
So just wanted to share, like I'm living on my father's property. My husband and my brother have made the property. My bua's name was not there in the will. Still, my Tayaji decided to divide it. Then my sister-in-law, my in-law said, "Ki no need to give her because she has already got enough gift." What you mentioned, Professor Vibhuti.
Yeah.
We said no. I said no. I have got from my father. I must give it to her. And our relationship has solidified. Not that who needed or who didn't need, but the whole gesture. And
Yeah.
my father who died at young age, he's become a god for her.
Yeah.
For me, he's my father. For her, she become a god. And then, but in my mother's case, they gave up. Both the sister gave up the rights to the brother, and now there's a huge property dispute.
Yeah.
Though they are more, I would say more spiritual, more Arya Samajic and all, but because of this, there's so
Yeah.
much of property dispute in that family.
Yeah.
Just wanted to share that. Thanks.
No, very, yes.
Thank you, everyone. I would also like to call Advocate Shalu Nigam ji for her remarks on the address.
No, I think this is a very wonderful discussion, and we have so much to think about. And masculinity, yeah, sure. I haven't seen from this perspective, because when I go to the court and I meet so much of lawyers and police officers, and even the judge, the judgments are about the way okay, this law is domestic violence law is being misused, or the rape law is being misused. So all those kind of things are there in going on in the courts. And even sometimes you will see in my research, I have seen that the circulars from the Ministry of Home Affairs and other kind of government departments, that we should have gender neutral kind of a approach. So women's movement have struggled a lot to get this law, and now we are also talking about gender neutral kind of a thing. So I was wondering what to do in that kind of situation. So that is something which I think from here we can take it, and maybe we can do something about that.
No, actually, on gender neutral laws, I mean, one has to have a very nuanced perspective, taking into account what is the current situation across the country. While, the posh law, as you would know, that even the best of the companies, the Tata group of companies, has a gender neutral policy. So, and the UGC has issued directives across universities that if a case of man approaching that he is violated has to be taken seriously. So one has to understand that when we talk about male dominance overall in our society, that nobody can contest that ours is not patriarchal. It is patriarchal, it is male dominated, but one has to also see that where the needle is shifting. At the workplace, if you find that there are women in positions of power and men subordinated, in a school setting, if the teacher, because the definition of sexual harassment is wider, it's not just sexual act, right? If we are crystal clear on that, if that definition implies any act which a teacher, because of position of power, then she can be a female teacher and the student can be a male teacher, right? So one should understand that. But an argument for all the laws in our country to be gender neutral, I would say India is not ready. There are three Indias where we are living. This is the simplest way I'm describing that. 10% of the people, your students who are co-educate in a co-educational setting learning, they see from their prism. They are talking about modern day equality. 21st century equality, but they have not seen with their prism the whole of India, right? How women are living, how other minorities are living, right? So from their perspective, they are saying as a theoretical principle, all are equal, right? But the reality you have to bring, so वो एक 10% लोग हैं जो अपने चश्मे से देख रहे हैं और वो गलत नहीं है अपनी नजर से, लेकिन is India prepared for that gender neutral laws where equality of opportunities of education, equality of opportunities for employment, is it on equal footing, male versus others, other gendered? ये जब उनको सच्चाई दिखने लगेगी अपने चश्मे से और दूसरों के सहारे से भी वो देखने लगे under guided support, then they would realize that we are really not ready. You know, so one is that 10%, then 50% of the India, they are highly educated women, right? Empowered women. But there is no dearth of examples to tell, and highly educated, salaried woman also submitting her salaries earned after the month to her father-in-law. ये पढ़ी लिखी है ना, empowered औरत है, right? So ये इंडिया तुम देख रहे हो क्या जिसमें वो अपने कमाई के ऊपर उसका खुद का हक नहीं है? ये तुम समझ पा रहे हो क्या? ये हमें समझाना है. और बाकी का 50% है जो रूरल एरियाज एंड अदर्स हु आर स्टिल स्ट्रगलिंग फॉर एग्जिस्टेंस, फॉर देयर सर्वाइवल्स. ये भी इंडिया का पार्ट है ना. तो आप कौन से इंडिया की बात कर रहे हो? वो 10% जो आपके लेवल के पढ़े लिखे हैं, जिनको, जो आपके दोस्त हैं, सहेलियां हैं, आप तो उनको अपने चश्मे से देख रहे हो ना. So this is what, and you know, you and I have to talk in colloquial language, simple language. जब आपने 40-50 साल, this autonomous women's movement, which started from the 70s, has focused on working with women and girls, right? I was asking that question earlier. How much of the work must have been done with boys and men? जब आपने इतने साल जो काम किया, जो आपके मॉड्यूल के टॉपिक्स में देख रहा था ना, इम्पैक्ट ऑफ द वुमेन्स मूवमेंट, राइट, ओवर द इयर्स, तो ये इम्पैक्ट आपने सस्टेन किया, आपने देखा 40-50 साल. आपने जब एक ग्रुप ऑफ मेन के साथ लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट के तौर पे काम ही नहीं किया, लेकिन आप रिजल्ट्स फटाफट चाहते हो, रिजल्ट चाहते हो, देयर शुड बी शिफ्ट इन एटीट्यूड्स. Funders are giving money to show in 1 year, at the end of the year, so many people transformed. But you and I, seriously, जो policy और programmatic implications पे काम करते हैं, हमें मालूम है 1 साल काम करने से नहीं होता है attitudinal change. So are we ready? So, you know, what I'm talking is that the pathways, the roadmap is there clear. अगर आप ऐसी दुनिया चाहते हैं जहां men, women, other trans people and all live in harmoniously coexistent, that means every stakeholder has a role to play. You know, आपके पास वो vision होना चाहिए जो, I mean, this is not a space for, I mean, I'm taking this as an opportunity, I'm eating your time, but you know, I'm wanting you all to think कि, you know, एक simple theoretically framework में भी देखे जाए, ये जो 5 subsystems मैंने कहे, family, religion, education, governance and media, which shape our thoughts and ideas about gender, right? These are the 5 major pillars on which the superstructure of patriarchy is there, right? What would be a long-term solution? Investment in men, jo bol rahe ho, in each of these subsystems there are differently thinking men, no? उनके साथ आपने काम किया क्या? A simple thing, अभी 33% रिजर्वेशन पार्लियामेंट में हो गया है, उसके रूल्स बन रहे हैं, राइट? बट इंपॉर्टेंट है वो इतने साल तक, you know, was lying stagnant. Did anyone thought that we should engage the male parliamentarians who are differently thinking? You know, उसके लिए क्या चाहिए? इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए, टाइम चाहिए, इमीडिएट रिजल्ट्स नहीं मिलने वाला है. right? So imagine all these 5 subsystems. If family, कुछ पेरेंट्स हैं जो अपनी डॉटर्स को बढ़ावा देते हैं कि तुम्हें देखो असाइनमेंट के लिए बाहर देर तक जाना पड़े, यू नो यू आर फ्री टू गो, राइट? सो वो एग्जाम्पल जब बढ़ेंगे, you know, more पेरेंट्स एसोसिएशंस, मोर पेरेंट्स एग्जाम्पल्स दिखने लगेंगे कि जहां दंगल जैसी फिल्म है जिसमें जो आमिर खान जो प्रोटेगनिस्ट है वो बोलता है मैंने अपनी लड़कियों को लड़कों के जैसे परवरिश की। हम ऐसे पिता चाहते हैं क्या? लड़कों जैसे बढ़ाया उनको, मतलब क्या है? योर स्टैंडर्ड वाज मेल। आपकी नींव जो थी, फाउंडेशन था कि बेंचमार्क वाज मेल, और आप अच्छे रेसलर नहीं बन पाए तो वो सपना आपने लड़कियों में डाल दिया जो उसका उस लड़की का सपना नहीं था। So, you know, when you respect the autonomy and give impetus to the child, irrespective of whether male or female, or a trans person, you know, so I think all these subsystems you need to have examples. And right now, you know, you and I have to assure the people with whom we work that the numbers are less, right? Promising examples कम है, लेकिन ये कैसे बढ़ाएंगे ना, जो आज अपने इतने कुछ लोगों ने एग्जाम्पल्स दिए, स्मिथ ने और लोगों ने, यू नो, अपनी निजी जिंदगी के ना, तो वो जब स्वेल हो जाएंगे, when you know, when one talks to the other and the others also take inspiration. Array, you know, if the protagonist could do this in a film or in my article, you know, why can't I do? You know, it's a safer, non-threatening way rather than pointing figures. आप perpetrators हो, आप में क्या बदल होने वाला है? ये strategy काम नहीं आएगा. But long term, where you are giving a space for that person also to reflect, at the same time you are no way condoning. You are telling the gravity of the situation, but also ensuring that they are not overwhelmed. You know, so that's the challenge of working with young people with whom you all must be working with. So, you know, the moment, even in a gender course or, you know, any kind of program intervention you're having on gender, you have to ensure that the target audience, they don't feel so overwhelmed. अरे इतनी बड़ी समस्या है, हजारों सालों से चलती आ रही है, मैं क्या करने वाला हूँ? You know, so your role is to tell that whatever your little bit, how you will contribute to the wider picture. You know, and we are not asking. When I started mentoring young boys, I had a clear mandate. I was not there to allow them that they should become social workers. They should be students only. Reach out to peers in their time, which is co-curricular and extracurricular, that kind of thing. Focus on academics, but do while academics relate to what you are learning in your subjects. You know, relate psychology with what you are learning, relate your subject, you know, with the happenings around. So I think that's what is a very, you know, we have to craft the strategy, the approach systematically. You know, एक तरह से एक आज की तारीख में, you know, person like me passionately would say that I was telling earlier that men are part of the problem. You know, now this is a simple thing that they should be feeling part of the solution, right? Now, अगर बहुत सारे पुरुष इस दुनिया में, in our country, don't even they are still in that slumber. They are still not willing to accept, some of them, that they are part of the problem. Because, you know, interrogating masculinity and first is deconstructing, and then you will come to reconstruction, no? So deconstruction कौन करना चाहिए? Women's rights activists ने करना चाहिए या men ने करना चाहिए? खुद. You are there to help, but somewhere they have to be part of that process, no? That they, you know, just as we dissect a frog, हमें बायोलॉजी में सिखाया गया है कि पहले समझिए वो फ्रॉग को और उसके पार्ट्स को, उसी तरह आप समझिए मैं कैसा पुरुष हूँ, मैं पुरुष हूँ मतलब मैं क्या हूँ. You are giving slowly, you are unfolding the world before the target audience of men, that you are telling them that, so, now some of my mentees who have become mentors, male youth who have become leaders, they are telling, वो एक कीड़ा हमारे दिमाग में, दिल में हरीश ने डाला था 15 साल पहले, कि आज हम चैन से सो नहीं पाते. What do they mean by that? वो कीड़ा डाला है मतलब, everything they are looking with the gender lens.
Gender.
And they are saying that our lives have also become positive and enriching. So I think that is what, हमें example जब देंगे पुरुषों के, तो उन्हें भी क्या मिला है. In fact, this is what I say, the multi-million-dollar question when it comes to engagement of men and boys, is that what it is going to give me per se if I am involved in that process of gender sensitivity. मुझे क्या मिलने वाला है. मेरे पास तो प्रिविलेजेस इतने सालों से हैं जो मैं त्यागना नहीं चाहता, और हम जो बोल रहे हैं उनको इन्वॉल्व कर रहे हैं, एंगेज कर रहे हैं. हम बोलते हैं यू विल हैव टू अंडो प्रिविलेज, राइट. वो तो त्यागने ही पड़ेंगे ना, बिकॉज दैट क्लियरली वी शुड हैव दैट अंडरस्टैंडिंग. यू आर नॉट टॉकिंग theoretical thing, you are talking of a gender equal society, so you have to give away privileges, which is the hardest thing. लेकिन for if a man has to think, मुझे अगर privileges त्यागने हैं, मुझे रिटर्न में क्या मिलने वाला है, ये अगर आपने समझाया in simple language, in colloquial language, in which that target group can understand that मुझे क्या मिलने वाला है, मेरी जिंदगी भी, the word stakeholder, that my lives also, our lives as men are also at stake. वो दाव पे लगी है. वो स्टेक जो है वो फॉर द बेटर अगर चेंज करना है, इम्प्रूव करना है, our lives have to be more enriching. हमारी जो relationship with our girlfriends, with our spouse, with the woman at the workplace, वो अगर healthy होना चाहिए, positive होना चाहिए, enriching होना चाहिए, तो वो मेरे लिए एक लाभ ही है ना. वो that is the gains. See what happens in the rat race, or in the race where you have to go for pots of money, कोई ये बताएगा नहीं. और अगर आप बोलेंगे तो बोलेंगे ये हंसने की बात है, मतलब क्या गेन्स के बोल रहा है. बट जो पुरुष इस पूरी प्रक्रिया में, जो एग्जाम्पल मैंने दिया मेरे फॉर्मर मेंटी का, इट्स कमिंग फ्रॉम ओन एक्सपीरियंस. नो, वो वही लड़का बोल रहा है, वो कीड़ा तो डाला हरीश ने हमारे दिमाग में, लेकिन मैं अपनी वाइफ और अपनी बेटी से बहुत कुछ सीख रहा हूँ. ये जब वो बोलता है कन्विंसिंगली, then that is going to touch a chord with the men around. क्योंकि और जब मेरे जैसे बोलने लगेंगे कि when I'm fighting with the machismo, with the man's idea जो परंपरा से आ रही है, when I am fighting, I should be open enough and candid enough to tell कि मैं उससे लगातार जूझ रहा हूँ. ऐसा नहीं है कि मैंने सब हासिल कर लिया है एज अ जेंडर सेंसिटिव पर्सन, एज अ प्रो फेमिनिस्ट मैन. मतलब मैं गाली गलौज नहीं देता हूँ, ये मुझे बोलने से नहीं होगा. मुझे सच्चाई बोलनी पड़ेगी कि मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूँ. मतलब जो सच्चाई है वो अगर आप फ्रीली ओपनली शेयर करोगे, देन दे ऑल्सो नो दैट इट्स अ प्रोसेस. It's something which they will have to keep on fighting, with the matches move inside them. जो बोलते हैं अपने अंदर का जो रावण, जो फ्रेज बोलेंगे ना, आपके अंदर का रावण है ना, वो पराये में नहीं है, आपके अंदर है. उससे मैं जूझूंगा, और जितनी बार जूझूंगा, जितनी बार मैं खुद को अनकंफर्टेबल महसूस करूंगा, वो एक पॉजिटिव साइन है प्रगति की ओर. So I think that's what in colloquial language and in a thing which they can connect, because the challenge I think will be that how these men can be long term supporters, no, मतलब ये टोकनिज्म करके हमें नहीं करना है, क्योंकि आज क्या हो रहा है, वो प्रोजेक्ट मोड में लोग बहुत सारे हैं ना, क्योंकि ये एक फर्स्ट नेसेंट फेज है कि जब मैस्कुलिनिटी पे लोग इंटरोगेट हो रहे हैं. देयर इज अ platform like Men Engage internationally, and there is Men Engage Asia, Men Engage Australia, Men Engage Europe. So it's a positive sign, but we have to also remember that it's a long term process, and one has to be, when share the gray shades, where men have changed that, but at the same time there are examples where there are cases of sexual harassment done by people in the developmental field, and others have been mum, not taking a stand. So I think that is a big disservice. In India, there are examples in our own state, Maharashtra, and when Kamala Bhasin came to know about some such man that whom she thought was positive, but in his personal life and professional life, maltreating women, she disowned and completely kept a distance. So I think it's a long journey sometimes. I and Vibhuti, we would say that we are fellow travelers. ये journey में क्या होता है, बहुत समय ऐसा तो वो loneliness and the moments of reflection and reflective mode में बहुत बार कभी कभी अकेले होते हैं, कभी कोई fellow traveler मिल जाएगा, उनको लेके चलना है, जो pause ले रहे हैं, या जो मैंने पहले वाला example दिया, feminists who have had bitter experiences. Our job is not to change their outlook and tell that, look, let you keep on sharing what is happening. Are there some promising examples of male engagement? Keep on bouncing to them. Someday they will take a note. But at the same time, we don't have to discredit them and say that this is their stance. So so it's a very long journey, where we have a long way to go, like now, for example, curriculum, they are talking about gender sensitive curriculum, which will include the queer identities right from a younger age. How to tell that in a simple language? So there's a lot which is happening, and it's evolving, it's gradually evolving. The 21st century, the feminism has given shape to the sexual revolution politics which is happening, and it's completely changing the way it was being looked some years ago, 10 years ago, and now it's constantly evolving, and there are so many dynamism and so many strands and levels, and so I think we all have to juggle, and at the same time process oriented work. I always say process and task oriented. Once you are crystal clear that I'm dreaming of a society where all are living together in harmony, so what happens, it's like vision, mission, policy, programs. So वो vision आपका clear है, vision will give shape to the mission, and mission will then shape to the strategies and policies. But आपके vision में ही अगर है कि I'm looking for single woman, assertive woman, they may be single without men and all, and they are empowered women, but at the same time you are in your vision, there is no role for the men, right? So then if your vision is crystal clear that they all have a role and they are all stakeholders and they all will co-create that society, then accordingly the mission will be shaped. And even in the mission, even if suppose you are with an organization or with a movement with a certain mandate, you should have that vision to see the spaces for solidarity, and where you can converge, where you need to rethink, relook, re-examine. So I think it's a very fascinating, but at the same time, it's sometimes draining, sometimes quite a lot. But I think fellow travelers and fellow this thing will really strengthen each other, and that's how we will be moving there will be always, in any moment, some moments of stagnation, some moments of, um, paths which are, milestones. We will have to, keep doing our bit, everyone.
Yeah. No, in fact, निर्भया ट्रेजेडी के बाद एक इंडिया डॉटर्स करके फिल्म बनी थी, शायद आपने देखी हो. And in that, वो चारों लोग ये कह रहे थे कि like they don't feel that kind of कि हमने कुछ गलत काम किया है. And उसके बाद the film was banned by the government and बहुत कुछ हुआ उसके बाद. But then I think we need to have a kind of study, और इस पे शायद कुछ लोगों ने start किया था कि to study the कि क्यों ऐसा लोग सोचते हैं या क्यों लोग ऐसा करते हैं, जो abusers हैं वो ऐसा क्यों सोच रहे हैं कि हमने जो किया ठीक किया, उसके ऊपर उनको कोई repentance नहीं है. So doing that, I think abroad there are a lot of studies on
But
such.
here there is a lady who has done study of Tihar jail, the hardened criminals who were involved in gang rape and all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
and
think we
even
need
this
to do
Tara
more of such
Kaushal's
studies.
book, Tara Kaushal has written that book, Why Men Rape, and she has delved into the psyche, going into the roots, that what really shaped ideas, and she approached all the convicts, like 10 convicts or 12 convicts. She did an intensive study. So I think there are people who are interrogating, and they are going.
Even the Vijay Raghavan's department also, there are many who are focusing on boys in conflict with law, especially for the extremely, they call it heinous sexual crime. And the focus is on boys and interview. It's a qualitative study. So yeah, I think it will be, she'll be facing Viva soon. Then it will be in public domain. The thesis will be.
Thank you so much, sir, for
Quite
taking our
enlightening.
time and wonderfully answering all our questions. I would also like to thank all our participants and panel members for such an illuminating discussion. With this, we now move on to our feedback session. The floor is now open to the audience. You can raise your hand on Zoom or type in your feedback on the chat box.
So Yashika, so I think I can opt to leave the session. So I think you can carry on,
Thank you, sir, for wonderful discussion, and we'll be in touch with you later on.
Yeah, sure.
Many of us.
Thank you so much for this
Thank you.
opportunity to IMPRI, and I wish and hope that we work together, the policy level, talking about male engagement, advocacy. We have a long, many things to do, which we can do jointly. So thank you once again, Arjun and your entire team, and, Vibhuti ji, for giving this opportunity. We really hope that our paths cross, and we do work together in whatever capacity. The film festival which I mentioned, the 2-day traveling film festival, so if anyone wants to organize, or I can share some material of past catalogs of the film fest, which can be done in a college or a university anywhere in India. So I'd be happy if I mention my email ID and phone number, so we can be in touch.
Is
I'm
there
right
in the
now
chat box.
implementing the 6th edition of my traveling film fest, which will go to around 15 cities from April in the coming 5-6 months. So we'll be happy to have you all, in any of those cities, as fellow discussants, as participants, we'll be very happy. Thank you. So I'll just take your leave.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. You can continue.
Ma'am, we have certain feedbacks in the chat box.
It's chat box, yeah, correct.
So should I read it
Read
out
them,
loud?
yes. Yeah, please read them. Yeah.
Okay. So Pallavi says that it has been an insightful course in some or the other way. We all know or experience the things we have discussed in this course. but putting them into words and explaining them with facts and practical experience is very important. Ishmeet says, extremely meaningful course. Thank you, IMPRI, for this opportunity. I was looking for a platform to be able to contribute in my capacity. I will take it forward from here. Shilpi says, thank you so much, Vibhuti ma'am, for organizing such a wonderful cohort 2 session. It's amazing with a lot of information. And also Shalu ma'am, who has presented very good words with presentation. We also have Pallavi Chakrabarti. She says, thank you making it so comprehensive as well as intelligible for students who have never studied law as a subject. Rashi says, I am glad to have participated in this course. It has been a great refresher after college sessions on gender at TIS with Vibhuti ma'am.
Thank you, Ash.
Yeah. With this, we now move on to the closing remarks. I would now like to call Advocate Shalu Nigam ji, visiting Senior Fellow IMPRI, Advocate, author and researcher, Gender and Human Rights, to give the closing remarks.
Yeah, it has been a wonderful a month where we have learned a lot of things, and even I have learned a lot of things, lot of insight, and so it's like, we should continue with this course on and on, and of course we have learned so many things, besides law and strategies and policies. There is so much, like, this topic is connected to all of our lives, and what I have learned is that finding instant solution is difficult and time taking, but it's not impossible, and together we can continuously make efforts to end all forms of violence. So we need to build solidarity across social and political boundaries, and together we can collaborate to counter this violence in public spaces, workplaces, and in communities and societies. So with this message, I would like to thank IMPRI for providing this platform to organize this training course on violence against women, laws and policies. I express gratitude to Dr. Arjun Kumar and Dr. Simi Mehta for convening this course. I would also like express my special thanks to Professor Vibhuti Patel for chairing the session and sharing her valuable insights and experiences of movement and her personal experiences. And it has helped us, all of us, a lot to gain, insight into how women's movement has worked over years, and what are the struggles, and how, we can deal with burnout, and, a lot of things which help us at professional and personal level. So, and I would also like to thank panelists, speakers, and participants for sharing their expertise and contributing through active and lively discussions about what are the things happening. So it's been a great learning experience for me to understand the various facets and nuances of violence from different perspectives. And last but not the least, I express my heartfelt gratitude to all the team members of IMPRI, including Vashali, Vidhita, Satyam, Priyanka, Rehmat, Ria, Yashika, Ritvika, and all other members without whom this program would not have been possible. So thank you, IMPRI, for wonderfully organizing this event. And I would also like to thank all the participants once again, and my best wishes are with you. So together we can, I think, end violence against women. So I'll just end here.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your remarks. Next, we have our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, for the final closing remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
I think after Dr. Shalu Nigam has expressed her views, I think I also join, and her in nothing much remains to be said, but I have thoroughly enjoyed working with Dr. Shalu Nigam. It shows that how two generations of feminists work so harmoniously. And I think all the 24 sessions we had, where the experiential account was complemented by the 6 legal hands-on. So that makes the course very rich and complete and holistic. And also it focused on what are the remedial measures we can take, what can be the future pathway that we have in terms of creation of the structures. And here I am reminded of Justice Verma Committee is a recommendation to the Parliament of India in 2013, where he demanded the reforms that we need in terms of recording of the cases, filing of FIR, or the role of police officers and role of the court, and how to change the mindset, what kind of electoral reforms we need to have, where any candidate for the crimes related to terrorism, untouchability, communalism, or electoral malpractice, or glorification of sati or dowry is found, then that person becomes automatically disqualified. I think we need to add, and I think Justice Verma Committee also suggested that this disqualification of candidate and involved in any form of sexual offense should be included in the electoral reforms. I think we can also, wherever we can also start advocacy on these issues. And the most important work of consistent and continuous effort, because we can't just have an episodical concern for gender-based violence. We have to be very consistently and continuously work. I think that came out from all the presentations that we had. And I would like to end with the famous IPTA song, which was translated into the feminist version was made by veteran feminist Sonal Shukla and Kusum Thakkar. Awake, women of the world. Awake, people of the world, awake. Awake, O world, awake. Upon the throne of justice must a huge protest make. Arise, humanity, arise. Cut traitors down the size. Rise, shout, you have to be heard here. Wear away this tradition woven knit to destroy cruel oppression. Here they come. To end age-old discussion, here they come. Come all, come, we ask to get freedom in your task. To get freedom is your task. Today we will all unite. A lamp of dignity and justice will light. We, with friends and with workers, young and old in gender spectrum, here they come. To free humanity, here they come. To march to victory, here they come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your remarks. I would also like to thank Pallavi ji, Ishmeet Kaur ji, Shilpi ji, Pallavi Chakrabarti ji, Rashi Singh ji, Seema Malhotra ji, and Milan Pathania ji for their feedback. Ma'am, with your permission, should I go ahead with the thank you note?
Yes, please go ahead.
As we come to the end of the final day of ending gender-based violence, Cohort 2, Awareness of Policies and Governance, an online National Spring School program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course, I, Yashika, researcher at IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Gender Impact Studies Center. We are grateful to our experts for day 8, Mr. Harish Sadani ji and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, for taking out their valuable time and allowing the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation and throughout the course as well. We also take their feedbacks valuably. Reading for the session have been shared in your email, and a video of the session will also be shared with you for learning. A feedback form will be shared with all the attendees via mail. We kindly ask you to fill out and submit the feedback form. Upon submission, you will receive your completion certificates. We look forward to welcoming you for future IMPRI events as well. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yashika, for moderating the session so